Welcome to Resilient. I'm Lori Lorenzo, Deloitte's Research and Insights Director for our Chief Legal Officer program, and co-host of the CLO track of this podcast series. Failure and risk-taking aren't usually words you associate with a lawyer, much less a general counsel. But for today's guest, Tonit Calaway, her willingness to take risks and create growth opportunities after failure have paved the way for a unique and fulfilling career. She's the Executive Vice President and Chief Administrative Officer at BorgWarner Inc. and the General Counsel and Secretary. With perspectives that, in her own words, may be controversial, Tonit brings her authenticity to the podcast in a way that encouraged me, and I hope will encourage you, to consider a wider range of what success in law and life might look like. Let's hear what Tonit has to say. Tonit, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I'm really excited to speak to you. I just want to take a second and tell our listeners a little bit about how I came to be introduced to you. So a few years ago, I was working with an organization that was focused on DEI and talent in the legal profession. And we were the guests of the GC at Harley-Davidson. And I remember you coming into the room with this energetic, electric presence and talking to us about your role in HR and some of the great work you've done. I've been a big fan ever since. So I'm really excited today to have you on the show to talk a bit about your time in HR and moving back into the legal role as GC at BorgWarner.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you, man. And thank you for the kind words. Remind me to pay you later for that.
I was so impressed that day because I remember Harley-Davidson is an interesting place to work because it is an iconic brand, almost iconic among iconic. And you came in just full out Harley-Davidson heart and soul. And that really impressed me that you had taken the brand to heart and really used it in the work that you were doing. But maybe let's start at the beginning, Tonit. Maybe your younger years, who you are as a young person, and how that shaped your path towards a career in the law.
You know, you grow and develop, but I think the essence of who you are remains. I think I've always been a little bit strategic. And I'll tell you why I say that. I mean, so I'm dating myself a little bit, but in Milwaukee, it was a very segregated city. And because of that, they had a program that was called 220. And what it was busing African-American kids out to the suburbs. And in middle school, I was bused as part of the 220 program. And I went to the Wauwatosa School District. And in junior high, I played basketball. And you have to just imagine this. I was probably one of 13 African Americans in a school of all Caucasian kids. And I played basketball as guard. And before I went to high school, probably the year before, I told my dad, I said, I want to golf. And I'm really aging myself because this was before Tiger. It's not a sport you saw a lot of African Americans participate in. But I went and I said to my dad, I want to golf. And he was like, what? Where did that come from? Why do you want to golf? And I said, because when I go to high school, they will expect me to play basketball. They will never see golf coming. And it's a true statement, too. And my dad and both my parents were hugely supportive. And I think the following week I had a pro I was working with. And I then played competitive golf in high school. And I did not play basketball. And it is true, they did not see it coming. And the reason I say this story is because the part of me that's very strategic has always been there, even young. And that strategic acumen has really been a huge part of why I have been successful.
Did you know that you were going to be a lawyer even then? I mean, were you strategizing about what it would take to get ultimately to a GC role, or was it a little bit of a different decision-making process?
Well, to be honest with you, I wanted to be an actress. But let me just I got to give you a little bit more context. So my mother was the first in her family to get a college degree. And my dad at the time didn't even have one. He was a machinist at Falk Corporation. So for both my parents, when I said I wanted to be an actress, they're like, no, you got to get a job that pays. And in those days, being an educator was always, part of the African community history. That's really how the Black middle class arose, because the first jobs college-educated African Americans could get they were in education. But being a doctor and a lawyer was another path. So I actually thought I was going to be a doctor. And one of the things that you'll hear me talk about often is failing. And one of the classes that actually is the one that segregates those that are going to be successful probably in medical schools and those are not is organic chemistry. And in college, I could not get through organic chemistry, couldn't get through it at all. And my mom had always been saying, you talk so much and you want to argue, you should be a lawyer. And the minute I realized organic chemistry was kicking my butt, I decided, all right, I'm going to go to law. And really, it was really those two were the focus when my parents said, you got to get a job that pays. And for me, those were the two that I really focused on. But being an actress was actually really what I wanted to do. For all your listeners, I'll tell you the irony of my parents saying no to me being an actress. And it's always about wealth building and the more education you can have in the generations that come after you. So my parents said no to me. I get a degree, I go to law school, marry a lawyer, have kids, and my daughter is an actress in New York City. And I'll tell you how it played out with my parents, the people who are against acting. They would do anything for their grandkids. And my dad, in fact, my mom had died when Kira graduated from college, gave her a big check and said, listen, I don't want you to take a job, just any job. I want you to focus on your career in acting and audition, and this will help you. And I looked at him like, who are you? But that's the difference that, different levels of education can make your opportunities expand.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe your dad got to the point where he said, I think our family's going to be okay, so you can pursue this thing that may or may not have that financial benefit at the end.
Yep, I think that was it.
Yeah.
And he had done well. I got to tell you I'm very proud of him. When as I said, he didn't have a degree when I was in college. He went back to school, and the year I graduated from law school, he graduated with his bachelor's degree. And he and my mom did very well together. We were not struggling as a family.
What an exciting year for you both to graduate together. I bet There's some great pictures in the family album from that.
Yes, absolutely.
And what was law school like for you?
Well, I went to University of Chicago, which is an amazing school full of really super, super, super bright people, and I was not one of them. I was smart enough, is what I like to say to people, but I was smart enough to get through law school, to understand where my mind worked. And my mind is not academic. It is much more practical, much more business focused. And those areas I really excelled in. And so I really focused on those. And in fact, one of my biggest failures that I still feel profoundly was when I was a first year. They had like half grades, as I recall. And that half grade, it wasn't your final one, but it was like half the semester, I got a D. And I had never had a D in my life. Oh God, it almost killed me. And I remember calling home to my mom and said, oh, I have D and I'm crying and I'm all upset. And you would think she'd be loving and hug me and all that. And she wasn't. She just said to me a couple words. She said, so what are you going to do about it?
Well, what did you do about it?
After that, well, I'll tell you, I stopped crying after that because I figured, one, I wasn't going to get all that sympathy I thought I was going to get. And then secondly, I just said, so you know what? I'm going to have to buckle down. Before University of Chicago, things were fairly easy for me. So I could get away with a lot. I realized, this isn't going to be easy for me. It's a different way of thinking, and I'm going to have to spend much more time and focus on it. And that's what I did. Now, I still wasn't at the top of the class, so I don't want anyone out there to think I was. But like I said, I was smart enough. And that was actually a powerful revelation for me. I was smart enough because you can get through and around a lot of things being smart enough. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room to be hugely successful.
Yeah, I think that is a great realization because for some of us, I know we've talked before about how high school came relatively easy to you, and with the exception of organic chemistry, college maybe wasn't as hard as it could have been for some others. And then to get to the place where you're like, okay, maybe I'm not the smartest person here, is a moment, right, to remember. And what impact has that had on the way you lead? Because now you're the head of a legal function, you've led HR functions. How does that impact your leadership strategy?
Well, and I tell my team, and I think people who have heard me speak, I say this, and it's consistent. And they ask me, about how I got to where I am, and I said, well, I'm a product of failure. And that's a true statement. I mean, the D in law school wasn't the only failure. I mean, I frankly was fired from my first legal job at a law firm. And it was a combination. I don't think I worked for the best person, but I got to look in the mirror and also own my failure, because it was a lack of attention to detail. And what I actually learned from that was, you know what? I'm not great at detail. I better get really, really good at detail. And I did. To this day, I'm a very different person than I was then. I do actually pay a ton of attention to detail, but I don't love it. It's not the joy I have. I love to play at the strategic high level. But I learned the importance of that detail. And when it comes to developing teams and the next generation of talent, you got to let them fail. Now, it's not career-ending failure, but they've got to make mistakes. They've got to understand you fail fast, you own it, and you correct it. And don't make the same mistake.
Well, how do you get your teams to buy into that? Because for many lawyers, people call us because we're supposed to know the answer to things. And a lawyer being wrong or failing can be a pretty big impact for a company. So how do you get your teams to say, okay, I'm going to try this thing. Maybe it's really hard. Maybe it's brand new to me, and it's okay if I don't get it right. How do you do that?
Well, you don't put people in situations where it's going to be those career-ending, enterprise killing mistakes. You don't let them do that. In my team, I think there's 1 million people. I mean, every person in there has made mistakes, and I'm actually call them on it. But I don't call them on it like I'm reaming them. I don't call them on it like they're going to lose their job. Just said, you know what? How could you have done that differently? And this is what I want you to learn from that. And this is the person I want you to go to. It's powerful when people do fail. You build up that you're not going to fire them. It's not going to send them backwards. Is huge. So you have to build an organization of trust. And the fact of the matter is, you also have to be honest about your own failings. I still make mistakes. And I have a boss who will call me on them. He's constructive about that, but he doesn't expect the same mistake.
Yeah, one of the things that I've noticed about the story that you've told, even in the first few minutes, is a level of resilience, right? And the podcast is resilience. So you talked about failing organic chemistry and saying, okay, well, I'm going to go a different direction. And then there was a D in law school, and you said, well, okay, I'm going to approach this differently. That's a lot more flexible than sometimes we see people, especially as they advance in their career. What are you telling yourself in that moment, in those moments of failure? What is it that you say to yourself that lets you just kind of roll off your back and keep moving forward?
Well, some of it is, you know what, you can't let a mistake and a failure define you. You have to know enough about yourself, believe in yourself, that you don't let that destroy you. And I can't, and I'm going to be honest, like the moments of failure I remember deeply. And I can't tell you the successes, honestly, but I can tell you the huge failures. And they stay with me. And I'm actually pretty glad about that, because I don't take it for granted. I don't think I'm the best general counsel out there. I don't think I'm the smartest person out there. I have never been someone who developed a career path. I have been flexible. Heck, I wanted to be an actress. So, I'm sitting here going from an actress to lawyer to HR back to being a general counsel. So I'm built that way. I don't like things to be set in stone. I like flexibility. I like to be creative and innovative and think differently about issues. And so if you ask me about my career, even at this point, it can go any number of ways. And I'm okay with that. But you have to be okay with ambiguity. And being okay with ambiguity helps you be really resilient.
Yeah, well, I love the transitions in the career, right? So you were practicing in-house at Harley, and you had the opportunity to become the head of HR. That was not one you expected or had applied for. Tell us about that move, and then what that transition was like for you.
Well, I had no HR experience, nor labor and employment law experience. So if you looked at my resume, it was all public company, corporate and entertainment law. That's what I did. And the CEO at the time was Keith Wandell. He came from JCI, and he called me into his office one day and said, "Listen, I want you to become the new head of HR." And this was, by the way, not a long conversation. It was probably like 7 minutes. And I think you can do it even though you don't have experience. You're a business person. That's what we need. And here's your package and think about it. And literally that is how it happened. And I think, if I'm going to be honest, there was about 24 hours of pure terror. Like, how am I going to do this? And then I came out of it. It was a little bit like my mom in the back of my head saying, "So what you going to do about it?" And I realized then and there that was, at that organization, if I didn't take that opportunity, it's probably the last time I'd be asked to the C-suite. And secondly, after being scared, and it's okay and it's all right, and it doesn't show weakness to say that, I realized this is a huge opportunity, and I'm excited about it. I'm excited about doing something different. It was in that moment I realized I was a little tired of doing what I was. So this came at the right time. And I embraced it the next day and accepted the job. And then for everyone who has, particularly women who have kids, I have 2 kids, and my husband is a lawyer. Well, now he's a judge, but he was a lawyer then too. And the other thing, this is for me, but the issue when I went home to talk to my husband wasn't about whether or not he approved of me taking the job, because that wasn't his decision. The conversation with my husband and I was about, I'm taking the job, so I think we need to worry about childcare and how we manage that. So the conversation wasn't even about taking the job. It was about how we manage childcare. And it wasn't even, if we can't do this, you can't take the job. It was just, we're going to do it, so we'll just figure out how we manage it. And that was important too. And I guess we can talk a little bit later about that. But the next day I took that job. And I never looked back. And when you take a job like that, one thing that's really important is your boss and their support of you. And Keith Wandell taught me how to do that job. He was wildly supportive. And I mean, not only in making sure I was successful, but also being constructive and feedback on how I could be better and how I could grow in the job.
And you stayed in that role until you moved over to BorgWarner, where you started there in an HR role as well, right? And then
Yes.
and then moved into the GC and took on some other responsibilities in addition to that.
I developed a reputation for being a fixer. So when there's problems, people recruited me. And with BorgWarner, they had a negative vote on SAM pay. And that's one of the reasons I was recruited into BorgWarner as a CHRO. And then I progressed in that job, and then some other issues came up in legal, and then I moved into the legal department, and it's kind of just grown from there.
Yeah. Can we go back to being an executive and a mom, right? Because I feel like we as a legal profession don't talk about this as much as we could to set the example for others. So I have 6 kids, and I, like you, have taken some turns in my career that I would have never expected on the day I graduated from law school. And a lot like you, I never had the conversation with my husband, should I or shouldn't I? I am. And so what does that mean in terms of how we manage our household? Any advice to moms, young moms, maybe young women who are thinking about becoming moms in this profession?
So I'm going to say something that's probably going to have some of your listeners upset. But I'm just going to be honest. There was no point in my life where I ever thought I was going to be a mom first. So I'm going to pause for a moment, because if you listen to any woman executive, usually on the talking circuit, they always say family first, mom first. And I was never that way. For me, I was hugely ambitious, young, and it was just a part of me. And when I met my husband and we decided to have kids, it didn't stop. Now, I just want to take just a moment for everyone who's listening. Just because I say I'm not mom first doesn't mean my kids aren't wildly loved, spoiled rotten, and don't mind spending not mom first money. I'm going to be very frank with you. I think they're pretty well they're just nice humans and some well-adapted humans. As I said, my daughter graduated from college and she's an actress in New York City, and my son is a freshman and a half at Yale. And I think they would tell you the same thing. My career has always been first, but it doesn't mean that you could have a career and believe that it's first and not be a loving mother. You can do it both.
I want to repeat that because I think it's important. I think that we don't talk about the different ways you can be a mom and be an executive, a successful business person, lawyer. And the path you just described is one way to do it, right? It's not for everyone, but I think we should say that, we can do it this way. We can be highly ambitious and still be good mom, and not do mom first, do work first, and still have healthy, well-adjusted kids. So I appreciate your honesty there. I think it's an important message, so that the moms and the dads know there's not just one right way to do this.
And there's not. It depends on what you want. And you got to be honest with what you want. And too often, I think women put what they want second and third. And I took the other approach, and it was always first for me. Now, did I miss any kids' plays or any of that? No, I really didn't. I will tell you, though, I made mistakes as a mom, and I don't know how many mothers talk about this, too. Because, I was wildly ambitious, there were often times I didn't really pay attention to the schedule, and I almost dropped kids off when there was no school. That's happened more than a couple occasions, and the kids would laugh at that. And for them, it was fun because I screwed up, took them to school, there's no school, so I had to figure out what to do. And usually those are days where I'm on the phone, but we're out somewhere at the museum or whatever, having fun, but I'm still kind of working and on the phone. So and they will laugh about that now. But I have done that. I have made mistakes when I was supposed to didn't bring snacks, so then I'm calling the bagel place. It's not without mistakes. And I will tell you, that old adage about you can have it all. I think you can have it all. You just can't have it all at the same level.
Yeah. And I just think being a mom, you can't do it without making mistakes. You just make the best decisions you can with the information that you have. And you don't always get it right. And you can't expect yourself to get it right. You just have to do the best you can in that moment.
And that's exactly right. And you have to enjoy the times you have. I mean, I will tell you, we are huge Disney fanatics. And we have, since our eldest was 2, we have gone to Disney a bunch of times a year since she was 2, and we still do it now that they're grown kids. Now the difference now that they're grown is their friends come with us, right? And or I'm a guest with their friends, and I think really I'm a guest because I pay. But it changes. The experience changes over time, and it's been a lot of fun. So for those people who may be upset I said I'm not a mom first, I will tell you it's been a joy. And I think if you talk to my kids, I think they will say the same thing. And I'm not sure they would want it any different.
Yeah, I think sometimes kids want, the grass greener on the other side. But at least it's been my experience that there are benefits either way. There are great things about being stay-at-home mom. There's great things about being corporate mom. There's great things about big families, small families, having kids young, having them late. And I just think it's a matter of what you want and making, like I said, the best decision you can in the moment, aligned to what you value.
And here's the other thing I would say about women, our colleagues. We can't judge other women because there's so much of that going on too. And I think you just made the right point. You got to make the best decision for yourself and your family. The only thing I urge women is just make sure the part about yourself is true and accurate, and you're being transparent about it. You're not deciding that that's not important and putting that off to the side. Because I think unless we can bring our very best selves to any situation, it's not as good as it could be.
Yeah, and I think that raises an interesting point that I've heard a lot about in corporate America, not just in the legal function, but across the enterprise with the clients that I get to talk to, focusing on well-being. And I think we used to call this work-life balance. but I don't even know if that's quite the right term. But this notion that as whole people, we have to be honest about what we need. Do we need to rest? Do we need to exercise? Do we need to be eating better, resting more? What do you think about the well-being movement? Are you seeing this at BorgWarner or with your friends and colleagues at other companies too?
Yeah, I think that there is that movement out there, and people are much more sure of what they need. Here's where I don't see the difference, and this might be controversial too. Those people who want to move up, if they want my job, if they want a C-suite job, there is no difference in those people. They are working a ton of hours. I think they may be working differently, like, just based on COVID and everything. Not everyone is in office, but they're still, you see them. In fact, to be honest with you, the next generation, I actually see them, like, they send emails all kind of crazy hours because they're not in office. Not because I want them to either, because there are sometimes I don't want to see them. But the people who want to, if you want to be the C-suite executive, I don't see that changing at all.
And what I think, let me just make sure I'm understanding you. What you don't see changing is the work ethic and the focus and the hours, really. The
Not
work you
in
have to put
people who
in.
want the next big thing. No, I don't see that. I do see, I do see a general movement of people who don't want that. They want great careers and not necessarily taking it to the height, and I think that's okay, frankly. What I think I'm seeing more so are people are making decisions not because it's expected of them. I think people are finding the freedom to decide, I don't want all that. Great, you guys want it. I don't want all that. I am happy with this. And I want a great balanced life. I want a nice career, but it doesn't have to be at the top of the house. And I want the flexibility to work when I want to and where I want to. I am seeing that, more of that.
Yeah, more value put on having the choice, and like you said, in general, just not judging. Let's take everyone who's willing to work and give them a role and value the role they play.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can I shift gears a little bit? I would love to hear more about the work you're doing now. What's really exciting in your world? What are some interesting legal or business issues you've been focused on? Tell us about the types of things you're working on now and what's exciting to you.
Well, it's been an interesting 2 years. I mean, I'll start with the last 2 years. COVID has really changed the way we work, even in automotive, which many people used to view as traditional, and some still do. But this issue of not working in the office, not being in the office, working from home is a bigger issue, particularly for our office staff. For our staff in the facilities, things haven't really changed. And because they're still working every day, they're still building product, protecting them as well as our staff during COVID. We spent a lot of hours working through those issues, and I think we did it beautifully. BorgWarner is a tier 1 auto supplier, for those of you who don't know. And so we supply to all the original equipment manufacturers, GM, Ford, Volvo Group. And we've announced a pretty important strategy called Project Charging Forward. That's really about moving from combustion to electrification. So, the whole company is really focused on that strategy, and we think it's the right one, particularly as the auto industry is dynamic at the moment, which is it's fun to work, I think, in a dynamic industry. I don't know if everyone feels that way, but the industry in general is moving from combustion to electrification, and it's exciting.
Yeah, I think some of the things you've talked about, wanting to be an actress and then switching gears to medical school, then law school, your career path, taking opportunities that were unexpected. It sounds like you thrive on new and exciting and challenge. Talk a little bit about if somebody's listening and they're thinking about their own career path. I know that you're a big fan of being open to any possibility, but we've talked before about how you choose a place, right? Whether it's aligned to who you are. How do you go about that thought process for yourself?
when I interview, and this will surprise some people too, particularly on the diversity and inclusion standpoint, when I look at a company for a new opportunity, I have never, ever asked a question about D&E. I've never asked diversity. I've never, be it people of color or women. And the reason I haven't asked isn't because it's not important. It's because I didn't matter. The reason I came to BorgWarner is if I looked at my career portfolio, I did not have global, really, and I didn't have a lot of M&A experience. And I needed that to really round out my portfolio of knowledge and experiences. And I will tell you, Keith Wandell, who, as I said, promoted me into the C-suite at Harley, also said, if you ever want to develop into a really good business person, work in automotive. And I always remember he said that. And so when BorgWarner came around, it just checked all the boxes I needed. And when it came to diversity, it wasn't as diverse when I started. But I thought if I came to this organization and succeeded, I can make change happen. And now it's very diverse, and it's not me. I'm not at any moment suggesting that I did it. But it's a lot different company now than it was when I came. And if I had some small part of it, then I feel really good. But the other piece of this equation is taking a chance, going into a company and developing those relationships that help you succeed. My success at BorgWarner isn't because of me. I wouldn't be successful there had it not been for my boss, the board of directors, who's been hugely supportive, and my colleagues. These are my ride and die professional colleagues. They are dependable, they're reliable, and I trust them, any one of them, and because they're high integrity, great business people, and that is pretty special. And that didn't happen overnight. It took time to develop that relationship. But why I stay is because of them. It's because of the board. And the other piece of this is developing the next generation of talent. You have to do it in a way where you're not insecure. I mean, you got to see this talent. You got to give it a shot. And when your time comes, get out of the way and let them take over. I am a realist about that. And I think it's really important. And I don't think we always do that. And I will say women are harder on other women. That's another subject, probably for another podcast. But I think we have to just look at this next generation of talent and stop saying what is bad about them. And instead just embrace their talent, embrace their differences, and develop them. And not to be exactly like us.
Yeah, I think that forces us to come out of our own comfort zone sometimes, right? When we're looking at the different skill sets that different folks have, to be able to say, hey, there's value in that. And I have to acknowledge maybe that I'm deficit in that area to be able to value what someone else is really good at.
Yeah, I totally agree. And if we go back to the other things I look at for a company, I'm pretty transparent and pretty direct. I have a voice that carries. So there are organizations I don't work for. I mean, and when I say work, I shouldn't say that. There are organizations I wouldn't fit. And my advice for people is not to think the culture is going to change to fit you. Make your decision in whether or not you fit within a culture. Now, it's not to say you can't help modify it over time. But then you have to go in eyes wide open, knowing that. I would actually say, honestly, when I joined BorgWarner, I don't know if the fit was great. It has changed over time, and a lot of it had to do with me changing as well and seeing things differently and changing my perspective. But I also, like I said, I have an amazing group of people I work with. And so I think all of us have changed and morphed because it made it better for the company. And I was lucky in that. I don't think you always get that. And I just think people need to be aware of that when they look at positions at different companies.
And you've taken this role as GC from a slightly different angle than maybe others have, right? We've talked about how you like new and different, fast pace, and sometimes you're pushing the envelope even more than some of your business colleagues. Tell me about your perspective on business decisions and risk taking.
So I am totally risk tolerant, probably more so than most GCs. And that's good and bad. I mean, I'm not throwing it out there like this great example. You have to be aware of who you are. And I know I am risk tolerant. I know you don't get anything done unless you're really, really willing to take risks, but you can't take silly risks. And I tend to hire people who are more risk averse to balance me. There always has to be a balance. Sometimes it shifts in one direction or the other, but there always has to be a balance. And you have to be smart about the amount of risk and where the risks lie. And you have to really be a business person, know the goals and objectives of your business teams. And for me, I'm always aligned with their goals and objectives, always. It's not even a doubt. And there's always a way to accomplish something. You just have to be creative and innovative about it. And that's something you don't hear a lot in a legal department, but that's something I insist on my team at least thinking of. Because if they come with me and they say, this is the way we've always done it, that's a non-starter for me.
So when you take that innovator's mindset and you look at the legal function of the future, let's say, 3 or 5 or even 10 years out, how do you think law practice will be different in the future than it is today?
Oh, that's a hard question. I think with the way this world is changing and industry is changing, I think you're just going to have, first of all, I think the laws are going to change. I think they're going to have to, because it's just new technology out there. Like, I'll just throw it out, Bitcoins. I mean, just think about when that first came out and where it is today. There's already been a change. Some of these other electronic currencies forcing laws to change and people to evolve. And I think you're going to just see more of that. And it's not going to just be currency. It's going to be, in our case, electrification of automobiles and how that plays out in torts, liability, product liability, you name it. And I think other industries are going to experience the same kind of transformations.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think the key to it all is staying flexible, honestly, resilient to change, being open to the dynamic nature of doing business. What happens today could be different tomorrow.
And here's the thing. I think if people think that things are going to slow down and there's going to be a period of status quo, I'm not sure that's going to happen.
How do you stay ready for anything can happen?
Oh, God, I don't even know how you answer that question. I think you have to know who you are. And if you need to take a break, you got to take a break. And you have to be aware of those things that bring you joy, the things that allow you to charge again so that you'll be ready for the next thing to come is really important. And it's really important for the rest of us in the world not to judge others, because we're really quick to do that. And I'm not saying I don't live in the same house that I'm throwing stones at. We all have to work at not judging and be much more supportive, because there's a lot to deal with right now.
Yeah, you're not kidding. There is a lot to deal with, but I love the advice to know yourself, right? To know when you're ready to charge forward and know when you need to take a break. Because most of us need to operate in that kind of cyclical environment where we're, 100% running the marathon and then recovering and taking a break and fueling up for the next time. So
and there's one thing I said that I don't want to be missed. Know what brings you joy. So I will tell you, we have a executive coach, and whenever I talk to him, the first thing he asks me is, he doesn't even say hello. He says, "So when's the next Disney trip?" Because Disney brings me joy. I mean, I'm the goofball person in the line. I ride all the rides with my kids. I'm screaming. I don't wear the clothes. That's about where I stop. But I am a Disney fanatic, and it brings me joy. And so find that piece of joy, I think, is probably the best advice I can give to anyone.
I love it. So I think over the course of this call, some of the themes I've picked up are focusing on your joy and being able to channel that and retreat to that when you need to, embracing failure and learning from that and being ready to change and pivot and grow from those moments of failure, right? They're not necessarily fatal. They're opportunities to learn and do something different. Having a plan that's no plan, being open to anything, considering every option, and being confident, right? I think I love the story about the invitation to become the head of HR at Harley, because you didn't see it coming. It wasn't something you had prepared for, trained for, studied for, but your CEO said, "Hey, I have faith in you," and you believed him. And I think sometimes we all have to rely on others to tell us the truth about ourselves, right? For better and for worse.
The only other thing I would say is you can't succeed on your own. And I think that's important. I am here because of a lot of people. And I stay here because of a lot of people. So obviously I've talked about the leadership, the BorgWarner folks, but the people I'm not talking about that are important is your family, your tribe. Those people get you going when you're at your worst. And I have times when I'm down, just like everybody else. And it's those people that keep me going, and they're my safety net. And what you can never do, no matter how successful you are, is forget the other people that keep you there. Forget your team. The other thing that's really important is I have an amazing team. I could never do what I do without amazing, talented people that could take my job or who are ready in a couple years. The entire team, and it's not just the legal department, it's government affairs, aviation, real estate, facilities, security, environmental, and sustainability. Those talents are amazing. And I really couldn't do my day-to-day work without them. So you got to remember all that. I am nothing without any of the people I've mentioned.
Well, I think that's a great way to end our podcast, thanking others for our success, because I think you're absolutely right. There's no way any of us could be where we were or where we are without the help and support of what you call the tribe, the people that are there for you no matter what, good days, bad days, and everything in between.
I will say this about BorgWarner. It's not just my group. I think you're talking about an extraordinary number of employees that work the floor, that build our products, that are in the office, that are dedicated, talented professionals. I mean, I'm very proud to work at BorgWarner. Very proud. I got lucky, and it's been a joy.
That is a great feeling when you can go to work and you feel like, I know I feel that way when I come to work at Deloitte. Every single day I meet smart people, many smarter than me, most smarter than me, that are doing these really interesting things. Some days I just meet people and I'm like, I didn't know that was a job. That's so cool that you do that. So having the opportunity to just learn from people and to be able to rely on people and know there are all these smart people doing really cool things all around you, that is a great joy to come to work and have that experience. Well, Tonit, I can't thank you enough for spending time on the podcast today. I've had such a great time talking to you. Thank you.
You are very welcome. Call me anytime. I'm more than happy to do it.
Tonit, I really appreciate your time and insights. It's been fascinating to hear how you've embraced your failures and valued support from others to help build such a successful career, and applied your business acumen to lead multiple functions while navigating a dynamic period in the automotive industry. When you shared your philosophy to own who you are and live your life authentically, I reflected on my own career journey. Your advice to focus on what brings you joy and to stop planning everything and invest in your overall vision also really spoke to me. We've covered so much on today's episode, but if you want to know more about the Chief Legal Officer's role and the many perspectives across legal leadership, visit us on Deloitte.com and search for Chief Legal Officer. If you want to hear from other legal leaders on this podcast, let us know what we can bring you next. Share your feedback. We really want to hear from you about topics and leaders of interest. Hit me up on LinkedIn or Twitter to share your thoughts. Until next time, stay safe and remain resilient.